Hello, everybody. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Thank you so much for joining me today. And with me today, we have Michael Webster. We're Oh, I am so good. Thank you so much for being my first special guest appearance. I I I can't be happier about it, and I really appreciate that you're here. Um, and yes, he says he couldn't hear you. So can you speak again? I think I've turned you on now.
Okay, so I was just saying it's a pleasure to be here. Of course, it's the second run at it, so I get to dress it up a little bit more. But being your inaugural guest is just such an honor, um, and I'm so glad to be here, and just so proud of you, Cass. Talk about trailblazer, but we'll get into that. But thank you for having me.
Right on. Thank you so much for being here. So with the start of the show, as I'm sure you guys are used to now, we're gonna kick it off. We're gonna talk about cannabis busts around the country and the world and what's happening there. What's going on at Capitol Hill here in the U.S. We're gonna talk about cannabis science because we got some good feedback about things we should have talked about last week, but we didn't. So we'll go ahead and hit those issues as well as talking about some new patent legislation that's happening out there. And when I say legislation, what I really mean is the government agencies helping one company that owns a patent fight against all the other companies that don't own those patents, and it impacts cannabis as well as all the things that are happening right now here in Michigan. So we're gonna go ahead and start off here with a big bust again in New York City. Okay, guys, now you may be thinking, hey, I live in New York. Cannabis is legal now. Nobody's getting arrested for this anymore. And I am here to tell you that is not the case. Okay? Over the weekend, 9 citizens were arrested at 2 shops in Brooklyn with over $1 million seized, and those citizens have been charged with the same kind of possession with intent to distribute that we have seen for generations. All in a city that's always had a traditional market, only for the reason that they didn't have a license given to them by the state of New York because they were competing with people who had licenses. Now, there's a big fight that's been going on between licensed operators and unlicensed operators for a while. We have to remind ourselves that unlicensed operators have been around for generations. Licensure is new. It's only been around for like 10 years. So these people are here. They're not going anywhere. We have to figure out how to include them, not to exclude them. And until we do that, we're going to keep having busts like this where employees, workers, end up going to jail because their boss didn't have the paperwork that they needed to keep them out of it. And that's not okay. And that's what happened this weekend. And there's a lot of sensational, oh, look at how great the police department's doing. Really? You just busted a bunch of employees, man. Is that what you're trying to do? I mean, what do you think about that, Michael?
So, thank you for pulling me into the conversation. As an OG arrestee in cannabis, approaching 25 years ago, I was arrested in my hometown of New York City for simple possession. But what happened? What came out of that? The revelation out of these low-level arrests would shock the general public. They're not going after cannabis. They are not going after quality of life crimes. They are not cleaning up the streets. They are not situating the regulated market in position to succeed and not have sales siphoned off. They're using that as an investigative tool. The day that I was arrested for a small amount of cannabis in Central Park, I was rounded up with probably over 500 other Black and brown males from all 5 boroughs because they were investigating a big murder, a high-profile murder, and they were just shaking the trees. So, again, as an OG arrestee, it really breaks my heart to see arrests continuing because what it's revealing is really a schizophrenia. We're going in 2 different directions. As a champion of normalization, this is near and dear to my heart. But we're licensing some folks, we're locking other folks up. Mm-hmm. We're rewarding and punishing with the same set of hands. So it's got to stop. It's got to stop. But understand that at the end of the day, it's big business. There's a huge pipeline directly from Humboldt County. I'm not going to say California, Humboldt County, right into New York City. Mm-hmm. So it's not going to stop. You're not going to stop the black market. There are multiple black markets. There are tiers of black markets in New York City. So you're never going to get this regulated market where it needs to be. So I'll get off my soapbox. But
hey, we're glad you're on it. Thank you.
The arrests have to stop.
They do.
Maybe civil before Giuliani, and again, I'm rambling here, but before Giuliani and his regime took over, you would get what was called a DTA in New York City, a DAT, a desk appearance ticket, which was a fine. You had to show up. It was like open container or using a bathroom in public. But they seized an opportunity to truly criminalize it and move it into that category where they could start disrupting folks' lives. And I stand here as a testament.
And that disruption, everyone, is so real. And let's talk about it from a Michigan perspective. Michigan made decriminalization happen. They have done it over and over again. They have made it so, the crime here is a ticket, if you even receive one, that they can no longer use it as probable cause to arrest you. What else happened from that in Michigan? All arrests reduced by almost 50% since that happened. Think about that. That means police were arresting people using the smell of marijuana for probable cause for all kinds of things. And without that tool, they were unable to continue persecuting the public and oppressing them in this way by using this plant. Now, that doesn't mean that there were not still crimes occurring, and they are still today, but instead of saying, oh, well, it's just people who are consuming cannabis that are committing crimes, which, quite honestly, the DOJ literally just said as a reason why we shouldn't be able to have guns. So, I mean, it's not just police officers who say this, it's lawyers and government officials as well, right?
Exactly.
But we know that crime has been reduced by changing this. We know that there is a direct correlation, which we talked about 2 weeks ago, between cannabis use and a reduction in domestic violence, right? Quality of life is improved on so many levels, and yet here we are, New York City, 9 citizens arrested and charged. Workers
and what happens in New York, Cass, gets broadcast around the world.
Right?
Not only do other states and municipalities follow those kind of leads, but the world does. The world takes its cue from the United States. And when you've got your number one urban metropolis, getting down like this, it's sending a message, particularly to the opponents. And believe we still have opponents out there, not just with big voices, but with their hands on the levers of power. We have cannabis opponents situated in government at every level. So
we do.
The fight continues.
We do. Prohibitionists everywhere. Speaking of prohibitionists, the FDA continues to send warning letters to hemp producers across the country, telling them how absolutely unsafe and unfit to put cannabis in food. They did it just this past week. Another 8 warning letters sent out to organizations telling them that they had to stop doing what they were doing. And now they've started using the FTC to do it too. And the FTC comes in and they don't just send you a warning letter. They send you a cease and desist letter. And they come in and they seize all of your stuff if you don't stop it within the time frame that they've given you. In this case, 6 operators, hemp operators across the country, were hit with these cease and desist letters. And they're saying, hey, we're not even the manufacturer of these products. We're just resellers. And yet, here we are being hit by the long arm of the law, by the long arm of the prohibitionists, even with 39 countries and many other places, right? We're talking Puerto Rico, we're talking Guam, we're talking Washington, D.C. With legalized programs, they're still out there just as much as they can, using the prohibition to get there. Even when we're talking about rescheduling. Even when we're saying, hey, we believe that there are medical benefits and people should have access to the plant so they can improve their quality of life. They're still doing it. And they're not just doing it in new places like New York. California continues to be a leader in cannabis prosecutions. This past week, 2 Elderly Californians arrested. Their plants and livelihoods destroyed. 25,000 plants destroyed. Over 200 pounds of cannabis was removed from their property. These people were in their 70s. Now they've been charged. They've been arrested. This is the kind of thing we're talking about here.
We talk about criminalization. Really, this is a culture war, because the tax benefits, the revenue should have completely shifted this conversation. These are culture wars. These are righteous prohibition warriors, carrying out the last, I guess the last battle in this war. But it has to stop.
It does.
It has to stop. Locking up old folks for medicine.
Locking up old folks for medicine. Locking up old folks for medicine that they've probably been growing for generations. Okay? Right? You're not in your 70s and you decide you want to become a cannabis farmer. Right? I mean, come on. And it's California. We like to think, hey, California was a leader in legalization. But were they really? Not if they're still arresting people for the plant.
No.
And it's one thing, a few weeks ago we talked about, hey, they had to go out and arrest somebody because they shot someone on their property who was rifling around in their cannabis plants, and shooting someone is not okay. Okay, I can kind of understand that. Yeah. But I can't understand, literally arresting old people. Come on, guys, what's going on here? And it's not just here. This past week in Australia, which has a legal medical program and has decriminalization in many of its provinces, counties, however they call them there. They're arresting people there too. One person was arrested for transporting. He managed to get on the wrong road. It sounds like he was transporting to get from one place to another, from where the cannabis was grown to a dispensary. He got on the wrong road. He went into the wrong province. Now he's been arrested for intent to distribute, which is his job, right? And another woman, she was a medical patient. She got lost driving from one side of the country to the other, which, hey, guys, it's just like this in the United States, too. You might be in a legal state with a medical patient card, and you end up in Indiana, and you're going to jail. And now she's been arrested, and she's gone to jail as well. It's not just here. It's other places where, decriminalization is happening, but people are still being prosecuted. We have to remember this. We have to remember that the war isn't over, that we all have to stand together, that we have to keep reaching out to our legislators, right? And our regulators. And, the president, and saying, hey, no, we need to have this done, right? And don't let them stop until it's finished. And we just got to keep doing it. In the Caribbean, we had other big seizures. In this case, it was like several hundred pounds were seized out of a single vehicle. Hey guys, if you don't have a program, you're just playing with fire. And I don't want you to get in trouble, but don't be that person who thinks, oh, well, I can fly somewhere with all this weed and start a business. They will catch you. They have entire systems of dragnets to catch you with this plant. Even in places with federally legal programs like Canada, where over the weekend, Border Patrol decided to stop two gentlemen who were exporting or importing cannabis. In this case, they seized over 200 pounds, and these gentlemen were charged with trafficking in a controlled substance and lacking the appropriate tax tags. They have drug tax tags in Canada for importing and exporting of the same. Now, come on, guys.
So that's really disheartening. I just came back from a week in Toronto, and I continue to be just so heartened by what's going on in Canada in terms of normalized public consumption. But when I hear, about arrests, and it's just, what are we doing, folks? We're trying to sprint in two different directions. But before I move on, something else I want to point out, Cass, and that, when it comes to law enforcement or harassment, we always look at the cops. The cops are the first line of defense in this prohibition campaign, but it's really the prosecutors. Two words: prosecutorial discretion. Mm-hmm. Getting charged, having two small containers of cannabis and then getting charged for intent to distribute because it was packaged separately. Those are kind of decisions that are made at the prosecutor's the prosecutor's office.
Mm-hmm.
And we need more activity. We need more agitation at that level, because these cops are just taking their cues, whether it's quotas on arrests or, over policing. They're taking their cues. Though the reason those folks who get pulled over with a small amount of cannabis, the reason they're not home in a day is because the prosecutor makes a decision. Those folks could be sent home with a civil fine or a ticket. And then you have the cascading effects. Folks, it impacts public housing. It impacts employment, all these things. So prosecutors, don't let them get away with it.
Yeah, we definitely can't. And, speaking of prosecutors, for a while now, cannabis has been decriminalized here in Michigan, and there's a lot of prosecutors using that discretion to do nothing, to not see anything, see any cannabis crimes being prosecuted. Dana Nessel will come out and say, hey, this is not what we're here for. This is a plant. It's, hey, figure it out another way. We're not trying to throw people in prison for cannabis anymore. But that's not quite the same on the west side of the state, where prosecutors are no longer charging people for cannabis crimes, for marijuana crimes, but instead are focusing in on the scheduled nature of the substance. So you're getting charged with Schedule 1 possession and intent to distribute a Schedule 1 substance instead of marijuana, so that they can get around the Supreme Court's ruling earlier this year, which said, hey, guess what? It's a $2,000 fine. That's it. That's the most that you can get for these activities. And, they didn't like it, so they figured out another way to keep prosecuting. I'm sure that it will be taken all the way up through the courts. People will appeal, but it's lives ruined today. Even a couple of days in jail can mean you lose your job, which can mean you lose your housing, which means you could lose your family. That's not okay. Not for this plant, not when so many of us are able to enjoy it in a legal fashion across the country and across the state. And that's really what we're seeing. It's really what we're seeing. So,
right. No profits, no prison. You can't have them both.
Right. And there's still over 30,000 people in federal prison for this plant, over several 100,000 people in prison from this plant from just last year's arrest at the state level, over 22,000 in Texas alone. I mean, come on. Is that really what we want out here? Do we really want our police dollars, our tax dollars, our prison dollars to be spent locking people up over a plant? I don't think so. I mean, I certainly don't. That's why I'm here saying at the top of every news hour, hey guys, here are the busts. It makes no sense. We need to stop this activity. Like, plants is a plant. It's always been here. It's part of our endocannabinoid systems. We evolved to consume it. Come on, guys. What's happening here?
That is so important, Cass. People, even with, more educated markets, more educated consumers, folks knowing what your ECS, your receptor 1 and your receptor 2 are, you just hit the nail on the head. Because we have those receptors, because we have that ECS, that means we evolved alongside. We were here. It was part of our diet, part of our lives, part of our culture. And this divorce now is just having a catastrophic impact on our society. Just imagine, close your eyes and imagine our society where there's no prohibition, and no stigma and no taboo, and folks can consume. You're talking about really taking advantage of the mental, physical, emotional, psychological benefits of cannabis. So I like to tell a good story. A friend of mine talked about, before cannabis probably was even identified and classified, and I'm talking hundreds of years ago, trichomes would have likely been airborne, right? They grow, wind. So you're breathing in trichomes. What would our society be like if breathing in trichomes was as common as,
What would our society be like if, like in the 1700s, animals were eating the cannabis plant all the time, and so it was in all of our food products,
our entire diet, our
milk
food
products,
chain.
and and hemp hearts were a natural protein source from across a large swath of Europe and the North America and major parts of South America as subsistence living, not just as it is now, where it's a luxury item. Like, what what differences would have been made if in the 1920s and 30s that hadn't been removed? How much healthier would we be? I mean, just last week, and I know Yessie knows all about this, just last week we had science that said, hey, consuming these cannabis products consistently helps with diabetes. When did we start seeing a huge uptick in diabetes in the United States? Right around the same time as we made cannabis illegal. Where would we be today as a nation if we would have had cannabis?
Everything, our politics, our medicine, our socialization would be entirely different. Alcohol certainly would not enjoy the dominance that it does, and we'd be a healthier society for it, no doubt.
Less people would die. There would be less violence, right? Because we would, people realize really quickly that, hey, cannabis takes that edge off the same way as, a six-pack of beer does. Six-pack of beer makes me feel cruddy. Not gonna consume the six-pack of beer anymore. So, that's definitely, it's right up there. Moving on to our next subject matter here. We were talking about this a little bit earlier. We start talking about what's happening here, and then it builds up. There are so many levels. Why are the prosecutors doing it? Oh, because the way the statutes were written, because of the way the legislator did it, because of how the executive branch is doing it. And we got to talk about this right now. At the Republican National Convention this week, Governor DeSantis from Florida was railing against cannabis reform in his own state and across the nation, which is kind of insane. He had a lot of very interesting things to say, as he usually does, and I use the word interesting because I don't like to say bad things, okay? But somehow, cannabis is still causing people to be violent and harm people. Cannabis is right up there for Governor DeSantis. We got to get rid of it in the same way we have to get rid of abortion. I have no idea how these things are parallel, but they were for him, and he railed on it for a long period of time. And for some way, and maybe it's true, but I have a hard time believing it. He is certain that if you're smoking cannabis, it's making you a Democrat, which, I mean, come on, man. But these are the kinds of things that prohibitionists are saying. And it's crazy because he wants to get rid of the marijuana industry while wanting to maintain the hemp industry, which is the same plant producing the same intoxicating effects. I mean, it just blows your mind. So, in this case, we know that there has been a lot of talk about, him and accepting bribes for his votes and his vetoes and the things that he says. So, whoever is telling him to say these things, it's getting a little crazy out there. But there was a room full of people cheering him on. So we have to remember that those cannabis we talked about before is because there are leaders that are out there that are still trying to use this plant to divide us, when it could be being used to bring us together like it had been for centuries before Prohibition, to create peace, to mellow moods, for trade, right? I mean, people used to trade like silver, bricks of hashish. Like, come on, we could do it. If we wanted to step away from the stigma a little bit, speaking of that, and your voice and the stigma that is out there, over 30,000 people at this point have submitted public comments for rescheduling at the federal level. You can do this right now, regulations.gov. It's been out there for a while. Lots of people have talked about it. We talk about it every week on the show. Guys, your voice matters. You can submit your voice anonymously. You can submit your voice not anonymously. You can submit your voice multiple times. If you haven't reached out to the Department of Justice and the DEA and said, hey, rescheduling, yes, I want it. It doesn't go far enough. Why aren't we talking about descheduling? Think about why you haven't. Think about why your voice isn't important enough for you to take 5 minutes and type in a text box, right? We're talking 200 or 300 words here. There are people who just said, I agree, please reschedule. Or, I agree, please reschedule, could we think about descheduling? Or, I agree, I need this plant to live, why don't you understand my medical condition? It doesn't have to be more than you just saying, hey, I agree. At this point, we're talking like 98% of all of the comments that have been submitted are in support of making this change, right? For every one person who submits a comment, there's between 10 and 100 people who are too afraid to do so. So we're talking millions and millions of people agree with the change that's moving forward. Your voice should be among them. Don't not include yourself in this historical moment where we're discussing rescheduling. It only happens like once every 10 to 15 years. It's only been scheduled for 50 years, right? For some people, that's their lifetime. You know, the entirety of their life, it's been scheduled as Schedule 1, as the most dangerous, most addictive substance that's out there, when all of the science, even the science of the government, says that that's not true. Even before they put that rule in place, they knew it wasn't true, but they did it anyway, right? And, building these laws and rules around lies isn't going to get us where we need to go. It's not going to improve our quality of life or make our neighborhood safer. So get your voice out there. Make sure you submit that, right? And I know we have talked about this many times. Last week, the Appropriations Committee in the House had introduced an amendment to the spending bill that was going to make it so rescheduling was not going to be something that the DEA was allowed to do any longer, which is crazy since they're the only ones that have ever been allowed to do scheduling to begin with. But whatever. The GOP, they do very interesting things. Nothing we can do about that, all right? But now we have a bipartisan group that is changing that. They've already, comes out of committee, then there's an opportunity for more amendments. That's where we are right now. And I think that's really important. I think that it just shows that the phone calls and the letters and, showing up at their offices is working. We have to keep doing this. We cannot let up the pressure, because if we do, the prohibitionists will win. And they've been winning for decades, right? It's all of us showing up that gets us where we need to go, right? So thank you very much, Nancy Mace, Republican, South Carolina. Thank you very much, Rashida Tlaib, Democrat, Michigan. Hey, okay, I'm very excited about that. I'm always excited to see what she's doing. You are working right now to fix the spending bill. Thank you very much for doing that. If you weren't fixing it, we're going to have worse outcomes for medical patients. We're going to have more people going to prison, wasting our tax dollars, sending people to prison for no reason, right? And we're not going to let the experts in the executive branch, no matter how much I dislike the DEA, okay? We're not going to let them do their job, which is rescheduling, when they might actually do their job for the first time in 50 years. Come on, guys. This is, we should be able to do this, right? So that's what's happening on the Capitol Hill right now. I think this is important. I'm glad to share it with you. When was the last time you reached out and talked to your representative, Michael?
I cannot say with certainty when the last time. I don't have as much. I'm a little bit more of a skeptic, a little bit more jaded, but I know the important work, the advocacy, at the federal level, even state level, it needs to go on. I'm situated a little more. I'm centered in the culture, working on corresponding moves at the street level, the culture level, the consumer level, that either complement some of these legislative, often knee-jerk actions, or the lack thereof. And I can't let us move on from the legislative piece without talking about the Doobie Act.
Right? Oh, it's good. Go ahead.
Doobie Act. Now, I got to go to my notes to get the acronym, unless you know it.
Oh, I was reading about it the other day, and I was like, this has got to be satire. And it wasn't.
That's exactly why I dove in. Okay, so it is let me read it for you. It is the Dismantling Outdated Obstacles and Barriers to the Individual Element Act.
Employment Act.
This is from Democratic Senator Peters here in Michigan. And the kernel here is stop the cannabis testing for federal jobs. Now, these folks that I'm, advocating for are not your diehard cannabis enthusiasts. They're not at the events. They're not going to the dispensary. Some of them may have consumed cannabis 10 years ago, 20 years ago in college. But many federal employees, depending on what agency you're in, are required to take a polygraph every 5, sometimes 10 years. And you have to answer truthfully. That question is posed. Have you consumed cannabis? So I feel like this is a game changer. If we can get that done, then you get a whole cadre of folks who, are not on the front lines, but provide that sort of rear guard support that momentum. Those are the folks who are going to respond to surveys and, you know, do outreach to the federal agencies. And so we need those folks there. So
We do.
hats off to Senator Peters. You know, our chambers are so divided right now. I don't know if this gets passed, but God bless him for raising this, because that's a quiet but probably large segment of the cannabis consumer community who are trapped.
Yeah, it's almost 30 million citizens.
Jeez.
That are impacted by this, because it's all
the
federal
Doobie Act.
employees.
The kids don't. The young people, they don't know the Doobie. They don't. That's what you call. And I'm going off of, you know, like 80s sitcoms, but I think the 60s and 70s, that was your pre-roll was called the Doobie.
Oh yeah.
But I doubt that was the acronym back then.
We speak up in smoke in my house for sure. So,
okay, there you go.
Big doobies, like foot long ones, whole ounces, 3 ounces in one. Make it as long as possible.
Wow.
Thank you so much for bringing that. You know, sometimes I see this was also introduced at the same time as the CARE Act.
Yes.
You know, it's introduced at the same time as the State Act, right? Like these, you know, people are still introducing legislation for federal legalization. They're still introducing it for expungement. They're still introducing it to take it away from employment screening, right? Or long-term screening of federal employees and contractors, right? Like that is still occurring. And I appreciate that you bring this, because a lot of times I say, okay, those things are there, but until they're getting legs, right? Until they're coming out of committee, you know, until I see them on the docket, I'm not like, you know, call your senator today.
We're not doing the victory lap yet, but just to know that, you know, the legislation has evolved past, you know, just the rudimentary, you know, legalization or rescheduling. We're talking about normalizing, and we're seeing it at the collegiate sports level. We're seeing it at the professional sports level. I'm sure you're seeing it in some state legislation, but
last week we saw it at the NCAA, right? I mean, come on, NFL, NCAA, and that's for, I mean, every collegiate athlete across the country, right? Like, come on, like we're seeing.
I'm not prepared to give NFL that much props.
No, I know they were.
Moving on.
Moving right along. All right, so talking a little about science. Last week, Diggy Suze commented, "Hey, what about all the other things that are intricacies of the plant, so we can do a holistic review?"
Yes.
We were talking about cannabinoids. We were talking about, you know, the safety of those cannabinoids, and how it's not just, you know, the inflorescence, the flower, right? What about the stalks? What about the stems? What about the growing medium? What about the flavonoids? What about how we, depending on our growing methods, right, may or may not be getting all of the good juice into the plant that we might have been getting 50 years ago, 100 years ago, 300 years ago, because everything's changed. The difference between growing under the sun, for instance, and growing under lights indoors, right? The difference between, you know, leaving something with a microbiome at its root system and putting it in a semi-sterile environment indoors where we try to not have that, or we control the soil mediums, whether, even if you're not using soy, if you're using cocoa, in such a way that we're saying, hey, we're going to only add the micros we want, whether, you know, and we're not getting everything that might have been in the soil, right, with regenerative agriculture and those kinds of things, right? Changing the kinds of nitrogen sources, for instance. So how should we look at that? I feel like this was important, and I wish that I would have heard this from Diggy before I ended, because we could have talked more about this. Guys, please ask me anything. It's all about that. If you have questions, if you think I'm going the wrong way, like I want to know, right? This is news. If I'm not capturing the news correctly, you got to tell me, right? Because this is the news according to Cass.
Not only is this important news, but these are perfect segues, Cass, to do the deeper dive into these, you know, scenarios, these elements of the debate that are getting pushed aside for, you know, the low-hanging fruits, rescheduling, criminalization, you know, recreational markets. There's so much. So just to back up, we haven't come close to tapping the potential of the plant. And I'm so glad you're talking about, non-psychoactive, non-psychoactive cannabinoids, other elements of the plant. I've got a good friend down in Houston. He works sort of in proximity to the Tesla campus. And they do some great work with cannabis down there, but they only deal with the stalk. He won't even talk to me about flower. It's only the stalk. So the cannabis stalk, the nano technology that's there, the nano, the 10 strength of a nano cord or nano string of cannabis stalk is stronger than steel. They are already using it in I guess in the Tesla equation. They are already using it on brake lines for military vehicles, and I hear NASA's got their hands on it. So I'm of the opinion that until the plant is presented in its truest form, without all these manipulations for particular outcomes, and I get that it's like food, if we use a certain ingredient to go one direction, there's nothing wrong with it. You go in a different direction with it, but we need to talk about it when we're talking about the potential of the plant. I don't want this plant judged because there's a lot of threads you can pull on that prohibitionists and opponents can pull on and try to create alternative facts, if you will, without seeing the whole picture. I think, I long for a day when maybe not at the high school level, but certainly at the collegiate level, whether it's a botany class or chemistry class, that they are looking at this plant in its entirety, root to tip, root to flower, and everything in between, because we haven't even begun to, this is the tip of the iceberg.
So it so is. And it's crazy that right when science was changing, right? Moving a little bit away from naturalist to like more scientific method in the future, that we also prohibited the plant, right? So all of the things we're learning today, right, from 6 years ago, 10 years ago, if you include the research and development side with the 2014 Farm Bill for hemp, right? Like the things we're learning, right? Flame retardant, like cotton versus hemp, right?
Hempcrete.
Hempcrete. How we could use it in our roads, how we could use it in the insulation for our buildings, carbon sequestration, using it to remediate and then safely sequester these heavy metals and PFAS and that kind of things from Superfund sites all over the country, right? Where you're taking it, you're not trying to consume the plant at this point, but you're taking it, then you're treating those materials and you're locking those materials in where all of that stuff's been pulled out and now the soil is safe again, which makes the groundwater safe again, right? There are so many things the plant can do. When we got rid of hemp, it wasn't like there was another amazing miracle plant that took over. No, it was corn, which destroys the environment it's in, right? Instead of hemp, which is constantly regenerating and helping the environment, right? So, there are so many ways to consider it without, if we kind of stepped back from the ridiculous level of controls that they've put around it, right? Because that's what's forcing us to, crop steer and use all these extra salts and chemicals and whatnot to try to get the plants to produce more, because there are limitations on canopy instead of just being like, hey, here's a field as much as you want to grow in it, right? Like, come on. You really have to wonder why regulators decided to go that way. I mean, I don't. They wanted some money. That's, you pay per plant, right? Like, it's just how it is. Then Metric is lobbying, so you continue to pay per plant because they make most of their money off plant tax, and we were talking hundreds of millions of dollars a year on pieces of plastic that just end up in landfills. That's a whole other conversation, right? But there's so much that's happening on the science front as well. We've had over 30,000 clinical trials in the last 50 years that covered how this plant helps with inflammation, right? With anxiety. Of course, we're still saying, oh, there are no medical uses with 30,000 clinical trials that disagree with that, right? But we are at the precipice with rescheduling, and I am happy for that. I'm happy that the cannabis science is finally having its day, because we've been doing it under lock and key and jumping through the Schedule 1 hoops for decades, right? and we're finally there. We're close, guys. Monday is the last day to submit your comments, so you should be doing it if you haven't already. All right. So the next thing that I wanted to bring up here, guys, is patent on vaping devices exists. It is not owned by the people that you think own it. The people that do own it are fighting, and the U.S. ITC that handles cases of this nature has decided for the first time in like the history of cannabis patents to actually take it up, and they are now reviewing it and investigating it. In patent speak, that means a bunch of people are getting ready to have the permission to be sued and have their companies taken away because they were infringing on a patent that was owned by somebody and not owned by them when they were making these devices. So what could that mean on the science front? Innovate, figure out how to make your own vaping device, do it a little bit differently, make it sideways, make it upside down, use different materials. Come on, guys. Figure out how to use the prior art and say why you are different and defend yourself. Don't just like take copycat somebody else's thing. That's rude, especially when they have a patent, because they've told you how to do it when they make the patent public, right? So then you're just cheating. Cheating is bad for everybody, right? So this is a perfect example of where the stigma is shifting. So science is coming in, and now scientists are investigating, hey, is this true, right? Was this patent real to begin with? What did the rest of the prior art look like? Are all of these people infringing upon it? And it's dozens and dozens of manufacturers in the United States and around the world. And that is important. It could change the pricing structure for all disposable vaping products in the US. And there, other things have happened similar to this where the government does things quietly, like they put tariffs on steel and aluminum, and then the price of buying a can of corn doubled because the price of the aluminum can the corn was in doubled, right? The most expensive part of buying a can of anything is the can itself. What goes in it is very cheap, right? So, unintended consequences, you may want to consider if vaping is the method for you and look into some reusable vaping technology before this ruling and investigation from the US ITC takes place. All right, so now coming into the last part of our show today, Michael, please talk to us about what's happening here in Michigan, what you're doing, how you're building community. This is our Talking About Michigan segment, so please.
Yes, so first of all, just thankful to be in a market like Michigan. It gets frustrating at times, as any market would. But when I left New York, it was for the very reason of finding a healthy market. I didn't just throw a dart at the map. I looked what was in the states that were in proximity to New York that were coming online. And the really healthy medical market upon which the rec market here is built was an indicator to me, particularly looking at California. And most of the markets that have, followed that lead have been successful. That's why great things expected out of Ohio, because building on a strong medical market. Same with Missouri, and obviously California did its thing. But so things here. What I learned when I got into the industry was there's a 5-year window on new rec markets. And, year one, it's raining money and, everyone's happy. Eighths are $65 and up, and, everybody's getting the bag. Price compression, consolidation, saturation, all these market forces come in, and year 3, 4, and 5, you've got a different market. But the good thing is that after year 5, it shakes out, resettles, and resets. So year 6 is actually a more enhanced version of year 1. So I don't know what happened here, Cass, in the last couple of months. I feel like in April and May, we were kind of riding a high of stability. And it just seems like overnight, the landscape has changed. Prices, the number of licenses that are being awarded, the saturation is really starting to affect the market in a more adverse way, because it's trickling down to me. And to tell you a little bit about what we do at Falling Leaves, Falling Leaves is immersive experiences. We are a licensed cannabis event organizer. Um, but unlike our competitors who just want to throw parties and smoke fest, and we are really out here championing the cause of normalization. So we take cannabis into spaces that are traditionally, not where cannabis is not featured, not only unwelcome, but just you just wouldn't just doesn't seem intuitive. So we moved into the 4-course fine dining with the infused dinners, and from there we launched into more of a B2B networking campaign where we're bringing the entire supply chain from CEOs, CFOs, CMOs down to the bud tenders and the kind of curious consumers, getting them in the same room, because that's what we realized was that folks don't know who they don't know. Folks don't know what they need to know, what they don't know and need to know, and they don't know who they don't know and need to know. So usually just getting folks in the same room lets a lot of that organic magic happen. So we've been doing that. We've been positioned there for probably about the last year or so. But what has directly affected us was spending by the brand. So the brands that get it, they recognize us as an effective marketing tool. They collaborate with us. They partner with us. We don't take check writers as sponsors. We want folks who are going to roll their sleeves up, get involved with us, and help curate an event that is going to be impactful and have a positive effect on the supply chain. So, it's like first hired, first fired. Like it's just been such a drastic change in the availability of capital for devoting to events. And it's tough out here right now. A lot of people thought that the summer months, the warm weather months would be the opposite, that we would you just have a flurry of events. But a lot of brands, there's a lot of purse tightening, and just tightening up on the spending. So it's been a little bit of a struggle. So we always knew that we had to find alternative ways to drive revenue, and the reason is because of this point here. And you and I talked about this offline. What if our cause, if our campaign is normalization? What happens when we get it? I see cannabis folks acting more abnormal than a lot of non-cannabis sectors. We really are, romanticizing and making a big deal out of the plant. And if our not the plant, but the presence of the plant, the infusion of the plant into more normalized sectors, everyday life, we got to be prepared for that. I don't think enough of us thought about, how are we going? What does a normalized cannabis component look like? So, so we're doing the work on that side. We always knew we'd have to, get creative. That brand, you just can't keep recycling the same amount of people into a room, in a networking event. It gets old, it gets stale. So we're trying to bring new blood in, and we're trying to expand the definition of a cannabis event, all the while moving cannabis from the focal point of an event really to a powering role, where we can celebrate our activity, whether it's dinner or
don't have to shake the plant around when it's normal, right?
Right.
It just happens to also be present. We may or may not be talking about what the salt in the salt shaker, but it's on every table.
Yes.
Just as an example.
Indeed.
And I agree, we need to be ready, because the commoditization of the plant is already here. People deny it, they deny it, but it's here, it's been here for a while. That's making people have to tighten their purse strings, because hey guys, you are involved in an industry for an agricultural product. Have you ever met a farmer? If you haven't, I will introduce you to some. They will tell you the life is not glorious.
Right.
Because commodity markets are driven, by large players, to drive to maximize efficiencies, right, so that they can maximize their margins. And gone may be the days of a 50 to 150% margin in cannabis, and that's where we should be going, because then we know we've done our jobs. We know that we've created a market economy that everyone has access to, so more consumers, but at a cheaper price. Right? Where, you a 6-pack and an eighth are the same. which is basically where we are now in many parts of Michigan, right? And that's reality, because that means anybody who could have afforded a 6-pack before can afford an eighth, and now we've achieved that market normalization, and that makes me happy. I know it makes a lot of people uncomfortable, and sometimes I think, man, maybe I won't ever even be able to work in cannabis anymore, because it'll all just be grown by like farmers and like automated machines like corn. I hope that's not the case, but hey, if we get there, I will be happy for it.
Right. But if we don't stay, Cass, if we don't stay present and involved in the agricultural debate, then you will see a Monsanto dynamic in cannabis. Now, all my cultivators, think about that. You have to buy your seeds from one player. You can only grow from those seeds, and then you have to destroy the seeds that are a product of your mature plants. We don't want that.
No,
we want to keep agriculture in the hands of the people. So,
and if people think it's not happening, this is just to say, we talked about that patent enforcement that's occurring right now. You know who owns that, guys? Reynolds America. You know what Reynolds does? Yeah, not aluminum foil. Okay, tobacco. Okay, like big tobacco.
Big tobacco
owns vape devices, making it so everybody else who's been involved in vape devices goes away. The same thing will happen here. 10 years ago, there was huge lawsuits because people were trying to patent the cannabis plant and the seeds from the plant, the genetics from the plant, and we're already seeing, GMOs of it, where they're building in, drought resistance. They're literally putting cannabinoid production in tobacco plants. They're putting cannabinoid production in corn plants, right? They're making it now so they have genetically modified yeasts that can make all of the cannabinoids in a bioreactor with no plants ever involved in the process at all. Right? The science is here. We have to decide as consumers, as advocates, where we want the science to go. Michael, do you have an event coming up? Because I feel like you do, and I would love to share this thing that you have sent me. Let me pull it up on the screen, guys. I'm going to go away. Michael will still be here. Okay, talk about this.
Thanks so much, Cass. In our furthering our continuing campaign of normalizing cannabis consumption events, we are partnering with NECAN, and on September 20th, the show will be in Grand Rapids, and we will be situated in close proximity to the show with a safe and secure and really robust consumption lounge option. It is modeled in the format of a club, so when we onboard folks for the experience, we'll be sort of onboarding you as a member of our club. But we'll be producing that. We've recently got into partnering with some of the big trade shows, MG Unpacked, Benzinga, and what we're doing is plugging in as a consumption event option. Folks come to town to do the business of cannabis. That doesn't mean they have to suffer without a consumption option. So again, September 20th, Grand Rapids. Will be out. The QR code, you probably should see it on the flyer there, fallingleavesevents.com. You can reach out. But yeah, we'd love to have, if you're coming to the show or you're going to be in the area of the show, it's not required as part of participation in the show, but it is that option. So we'd love to have you. And again, we'll be doing our normal thing, building community, breaking bread. We won't be serving dinner this time. It's a little bit different model. We won't be serving up for courses. But 710 Labs and Butter will be joining us and bringing you a really great consumption experience as part of the show. So really excited. So come on out. We got a couple of months runway. So reach out with questions or concerns. And if you're in the area, please consider joining us.
Oh, that's so great. I'm so glad. I love the NECAN events. I am planning to attend Grand Rapids. I will have to look into this consumption event. I know the last time I went to one of your immersive events, it was some of the best networking that I'd had in a long time, because it was not just the regular cannabis people. It wasn't just cannabis executives. It was accountants. It was librarian. Sat across from a librarian.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
It was local government officials. It was people from the DTE. Right. I mean it's a different group within a different environment.
You're letting me know we're doing our job, Cass. Right? That was always been the goal. Was the diverse audience.
It was so good. Okay, so guys, I want to talk to you about, so we have this good event that's happening. Cannabis is still growing here. We're in summer. When we're in summer, that means prices go up. It's just a little uptick, but it is an uptick. We just got the report from the CRA that June, yep, the overall price did increase. This happens every year. It's like an ebb and flow. All of the outdoor flower isn't gone, but there's less of it, so everything is slightly more expensive. Plus, we're having a pretty substantial crackdown on distillate pricing right now, so the price there has increased about 30%. Now, that's at the manufacturing level. Those are those dollars that Michael is talking about, those purse strings that have had to be tightened, right, because they need to continue operations during these months. We do expect to see a drop. Some might call it a cliff in October.
Yeah,
after
October.
we've had the first of the outdoor crop coming in, combined with what we think, according to the CRA, will be self-regulating to remove diluents from the distillate market before the ban goes in place on October 1st. So, there's a lot that's happening here. I like to think that some of it's because of regulators and some of it's because of self-regulation. And thank goodness for self-regulation, because I'm not sure that the regulators know what's going on. The most recent disciplinary report, okay, I just want to point out, we'll go over the top 3 and kind of talk about some other things, but, I like to think that the regulators are here to keep consumers safe, right? But I am often reminded that, no, really, they are a revenue-generating organization, and consumer safety is a thought for them, but may not be the focus. And if we look at the disciplinary reports, that becomes very apparent. Of all of the disciplinary action that was published publicly from June, which that report just came out from the CRA, okay, only 2, which went across 4 different locations, okay, had anything to do with consumer safety or access to appropriate knowledge or testing. Only 2. Okay. The others were paperwork exercises for licensing fees. So, coming in at number 1, failure to report material changes. 16 licensees sided with this. Most of them had fines imposed, right? So this means you added a person to your board and you didn't tell the CRA. You sold more than 2% of your company to someone else. You added an investor and you didn't tell the CRA. You changed the doors. This is a funny one. You changed the style of door on your building because you kept getting broken into, but you didn't tell the CRA. Now not only have you been burgled and had the expense of the doors, but because you didn't realize that just changing the style of door was a material change, you're now also having a fine from them, and it's a minimum $10,000 fine, okay, guys? So these are not insignificant fines, okay? So that's number 1. I failed to fill out a reporting form to let the CRA know that I did normal business operations. Okay, number 2, metric noncompliance. Okay, guys, we've talked about this before. You have to be compliant with metric. It is the seed-to-sale tracking system. There is no ifs, ands, buts. I feel like it, I don't feel like it. This is a service I provide with my company. If you need this, reach out to me. You can reach out to me through the stream, through YouTube, through Twitch, on LinkedIn. Pick up the phone and call me, right? I'm as accessible as I possibly can be. There is no reason to not be metric compliant unless you are intentionally, willfully trying not to follow the law. And if that's your deal, why are you in the licensed market? Go be in the traditional market, right? If you don't want to tell the government what you're doing, take the risk, because these guys, they have access to everything you're doing. They have access without a warrant to come to your facility, okay? You have an affidavit that you have to sign every 6 months saying that you're doing things correctly, right? So you can't be like, oh, I didn't know. There is no defense because I was unaware, okay? Like, what are you doing? Okay, this is the number 2 for June. Was metric noncompliance. Guys, like, seriously, if you don't want to use metric correctly, if you don't want to have an inventory specialist, if you don't want to buy plant tags, if you don't, want to have package tags, if you don't want to, record your sales correctly, go work in the traditional market, right? Because the consequences in the traditional market at this point in the state of Michigan are less, then they will take your business away, and they will make it so that you can't continue to have your licensed business. and that will harm your employees, right? And the family that helped build your business and all of your investors, right? So just don't do it. Like, invest in a metric compliance specialist, right? I'm one. There are many others out there. It is not hard to do. Like, guys, please, this is ridiculous. This is tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars in fines for not knowing how to use a database that's basically Excel correctly. This is silly. Don't do this to yourself. All right. Coming in at number 3, which is great because it used to be number 1. I wish that it wasn't on the list at all. Is not submitting annual financial statements. Okay, guys, we are close to $4 million in fines for not submitting annual financial statements. And, like, look, seriously, guys, get a CPA. Start 6 months before your thing is due. Submit the damn thing. It's going to cost you 10 grand not to. How much is it going to cost you for your accountant? I bet it's less than 10 grand. Don't do it, right? And then once you get fined the first time, now you're high risk. Yeah, so they're going to come visit you more often. Is that what you want? Because I don't think so. Well, here's 9 more licensed operators that just continue to, like, not put the statements together. I asked Director Hannah about this, and Director Hannah was like, hey, look, if we don't have the annual financial statement, how do we know that these products aren't coming in from the traditional market? Because we can't connect where the dollars are coming from, right? If they can't have that level of information, then they think that you're committing a crime because you didn't have an accountant. Just throwing it out there, guys. Come on, you can fix this. Everything else was way less on here. Operational issues. A couple of people got getting slapped again for not having cameras correctly. Guys, you have to have cameras. It's the law. I know. If you don't want to have cameras, traditional market. Okay? I know it sounds crazy, but the fine in the traditional market is less than the minimum fine in the licensed market, and you don't have to pay for licensor or submit to non-warrant having visits, or be inspected twice a year, or use metric tags. Not that I think everybody should be a traditional market operator, but if you're not going to follow the rules anyway, right? Like, then just go if they're going to treat you like a criminal, why work inside their system if you're not willing to commit to following the rules? The rules are difficult to follow. That's with intention. That's prohibitionists trying to make it so you have harder time to get opportunity and harder time to give people access to the plant. Now, there's a lot more risk in the traditional market, and that is true. Okay? However, there's monetary risk, right? And then there's the risk of your freedom, right? And people have been making that decision for a long time, right? So, okay, that's what I have on Michigan. Michael, do you have any parting thoughts as we come to the end of the stream today? And yes, he has reminded me, wow, we're going to stream overtime for the first time. We didn't even get to our Ask Me Anything segment, which we usually get to. I am so glad you were here today to share all of your knowledge with us and your experiences. What parting thoughts?
Yeah, just first of all, I just want to thank you, Cass, for jumping out there. You've been the tip of the spear in a lot of ways, at least for me. First cannabis scientist I ever met, the first person to teach me that water was a solvent. So thank you for those gems. And for creating this platform. Folks are lining up behind me. I feel just so special and I know it wasn't on merit. It was just probably random, but to jump on the platform first and share with you.
I just want to point out that it's definitely on merit that your events that I have been to twice at this point are on a different level, that this platform, what I'm doing is about community building, that you are doing this, right? That other people who might be listening to me should know that you're building a community in a different way, and that community is important, and that community changed my perspective about what I should be doing, right? So when you were like, hey, I'd like to come on, I was like, yes, Michael first, let's get it, yes. Just so
well, thank you. That means that means so much to me. And just to be in your ecosystem has just, and to be sustained and nourished in a lot of ways has been, just tremendous. To the Michigan cannabis market, I tell you, soldier on. Things may look a little tough right now, but we are the future of this market. We are the number one market. I don't care what metrics you're looking at. We are the number one market in the nation.
Yes, we are.
And we've earned that. Mm-hmm. To the other states, whether you're online, coming online, or you're fighting the good fight against the prohibitionists, do not give up. The barn doors are open. The cat's out of the bag. The toothpaste is out of the tube. We're not going backwards. So keep that centered in your strategy. And let's go. Let's not just get the bag. Let's get the plant back to the culture. I think that has to be the goal. And we'll be here. We'll be not only operating in Michigan, but all markets that welcome us. We'll be doing these kind of connecting events, bringing folks together. And we're just really excited about what the future holds. So fallingleavesevents.com. Check us out for what's coming up, and continue to tap in on this platform. This platform is going to grow. Like, I see such big things happening here. So I'm honored to have been in the seat first, and I hope it's not the last time. I hope I'll be invited back. But thanks so much.
I hope you will. I hope you will too. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. I will see you next week on Friday at 10 a.m. Eastern, right here. You can catch us on Twitch. You can catch us on YouTube. And we're getting ready to be pushing out clips to other platforms. So, if these are platforms that don't work for you and you need those 5-minute nuggets, they are on their way. So thank you very much for joining us today, and I'll see you next week.